Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Thrice Bound by Nicole E. Kelleher, presented by Itsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1. Lakeside Health Center, Chicago, Illinois. Exhausted, Natalia Waever resisted the urge to shove Adrian Sheriff out of her office. The man set her teeth on edge. Trust me, your brother needs people like me on his side, Sheriff touted. I don't mean to condescend, Natalia. Not like there's anything wrong with, he waved and all this open palm in her face. You being a not non-Fascina. I mean, I suppose you do add some value to being appointed to the board. Perhaps a knee to the groin, she admitted, then a shove. What Chris needs on his side is his business, Sheriff, she said, using her surname because calling him by his first name, as he always insisted, was an intimacy that made her skin crawl. As always, her refusal to acquiesce nettled him, but before he could respond, she added, "Since you brought up the board, I will remind you that this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. You are, no doubt, aware that sidebars such as this are completely against Fascina protocol, as stated in the bylaws, as well as being subject to censure enforceable by the National Order. I don't need you to. Besides, there's a general meeting this week, and you are welcome to put forth any concerns at that time." She put her hand on the door and started closing it, slowly forcing the man out of her office. "You know it's impossible to get new items on the agenda, and your twin never returns my calls. As the appointed liaison between the Fascina community and the norms, my brother's schedule falls outside my purview." Halfway into the corridor, he put his toe against her office door. "I've asked you nicely, Natalia." He leaned in, breaching her personal space. His Fascina power buffeted against her, weak though it was, trying to break through her resistance. He believed she wouldn't know it for what it was, that she would simply and unknowingly give in to his persuasiveness. But her twin, probably the most powerful of Fascina, had warded her. Even if he hadn't, Tally had always somehow been immune to Fascina persuasion. She gauged how she should respond. Ignore it, and Sheriff might complain to the Fascina Council that her brother and Bane had used their gifts on a derogatory term for someone without supernatural abilities who was born of Fascina parents. No, with Sheriff, she sensed his powers were weak. She could fake her reaction. Tally frowned at him, and then let her features slacken for a moment as she slowly blinked. A satisfied cast stole over his face. Then she shook her head as if coming awake and stared at him. "I'm not my brother's admin. I suggest you call him and make an appointment. Goodbye, Sheriff." He narrowed his eyes at her and started to push back into her office, but she was too fast. She shut the door in his face and engaged the lock. He slapped his palm against the frosted glass, then jiggled the door handle. "This isn't over, Natalia," he yelled, before she imagined storming off. "Thanks for the super end to my day," Tally groused to herself, looking at the stacks of papers she'd sorted into three piles. The Lumina Foundation, otherwise known as the Red Tape Black Hole, the Pediatrics Volunteer Coordination Stack, and another simply marked urgent. The latter was the largest and was filled mainly with details regarding the upcoming annual gala. Sadly, the PEDS pile representing the volunteer work that sustained her was tiny in comparison to the other two. Tally rubbed her temples, trying to ward off the coming migraine. She shot off a quick text to her twin, warning him about Adrian Sheriff, and then grabbed her noise-canceling earbuds, kicked off her shoes, made herself comfortable on the cushy love seat across from her desk, and then queued up the latest calming meditations her best friend Bane had shared with her. Immediately, her senses were lulled by soothing musical tones, and she pulled her legs into position and set her hands above her knees. Breathe in through the nose and open right palm, and out through the nose and left palm, and then reverse. Again and again, she imagined a sphere of air slowly arcing in a simple back and forth juggle. She'd graduated to non-guided meditation and was trying out new soundtracks, Gradually, she lost herself in breathing and somewhat gloomy music and visualized shedding each stressful moment of her week, working her way backward through the day until her mind was blessedly blank. Her eyes fluttered open, and her first thought was that the battery in her earbuds had died. But the way the sound seemed sucked out of the room told her that they were still working. Her 30-minute session had flown by. She took out her earbuds and placed them into their charging case. After a few neck rolls, she uncrossed her legs and got up from the sofa. Forcing herself to ignore the work on her desk, she reached for her laptop and tucked it into its designated slot in her leather courier bag. She locked her office behind her before turning toward the elevators near the reception area. The rest of the hospital might be a 24/7 operation, but at 5 o'clock on Fridays, 6:03 p.m., she amended, peeking at her phone, the administrative suite was deserted. The motion sensor engaged, washing the neutral-toned lobby in soft light. As she waited for the elevator, she rubbed her ears, trying to rid herself of the feeling that her earbuds were still in and dampening the constant noise of the hospital's forced air system. Even the soft chime of the elevator as the doors opened seemed muted. She pressed G1 for the garage level where her reserved parking spot was located. Fingers scrolling through the multiple emails that had come in since the Lumina meeting ended nearly 2 hours ago, she stepped off the elevator, registering the G1 plaque on the doorframe. The door slid closed behind her, and she glanced toward the valet booth. Tally frowned. This wasn't the garage. She stared down the stark, dimly lit lobby, trying to get her bearings. In either direction were double doors, each with frosted windows and no light in the corridors behind them. What floor is this? She asked aloud, hating how even the sound of her voice seemed to deaden. She forced yawned, swallowed a few times in an attempt to pop her ears as she pressed the button to recall the elevator. The up arrow illuminated and then winked off. She pressed it again. Same thing. She jabbed it repeatedly as if the elevator had sense and would hurry to her floor. The light stayed on as she did this, then frustratingly winked off when she stopped. Oh, for Pete's sake. She checked the time on her phone, 6:13 p.m., and waited. Even if the button's bulb had a short, the elevator would eventually arrive. The newly constructed hospital's mechanics were state of the art, and she continued to scan her emails. At least 5 minutes must have passed. Make that 10, she muttered upon noting the time on her phone. The screen flickered and then went completely dark as her battery died. Unbelievable. She looked from side to side, then marched down the carpeted lobby toward the doors on her right. She pushed on one and was relieved when it swung open. The motion detectors caught her, and the recessed lighting flared, spotlighting on her head. Where am I? She strode toward the reception counter before her, hoping to find a phone. While she contemplated who to call, the overhead lighting tracked her progress. But the desk was bare. No phone, paperclip, or pen. The motion sensor near the double doors timed out, turning off the entryway lights. There had to be a phone somewhere. She peered down the dark corridor ahead. Behind her, another light blinked off. Even if she didn't manage to find a phone, she would eventually come to a stairwell. Lights strobed on as she walked down the long, dark hall, trying each door handle along the way, only to find them all locked. Behind her, lights flicked off as she progressed. Somewhere ahead of her, the distinct click of a door latch sounded, and she halted, peering into the dark. Hello? She called, aware that if anyone was down there, the motion sensor should have turned on the lights. Rattled, she looked at her dead phone, mildly freaking out. Get a grip, Tally. Her words sounded dull. She took another step, then keys jangled ahead, the sound strangely crisp and sharp. Okay, then, she whispered, fear creeping up her back. Something told her she did not want to meet whoever it was down that hall, so she hurried back the way she'd came. The motion activated lighting picking out her progress. She pushed at one of the double doors, had a moment of panic when it didn't swing open, and then realized she needed to press the brake bar. She made it to the elevator lobby just in time to see the cars just in time to see the car's door swish shut. What the hell? Behind her, the ceiling lights had all gone off. She stabbed both the up and down buttons just in case the car was still there. Through the frosted glass panes of the doors, a faint glow illuminated the far end of the corridor. The windows of the entrance she hadn't taken were dark. Make a decision, Tally. And then she remembered the mace that her friend Bane had pressed her to carry, the little can, to the bottom of the bag. My bag! To her right, the light had gone out. She must have set her satchel down when she was searching the reception area. Her laptop and keys and that tiny aerosol deterrent were all out of reach. No way she was leaving those behind. She went back the way she'd come and had her hand on the door when midway down the corridor ahead, another light strobed on, then off. It was hard to tell, but someone dark moved under it, and they were moving fast. Tally scrambled backward as, faster and faster, the overheads flashed on and off. Whoever they were barreling toward her. She fled to the doors on the left. The fact that the motion sensors did not activate the lights was a relief, for they would pinpoint her location. There was enough exit lighting that she could see down the corridor. She followed the arrows, rushing to find the stairwell and fearing that at any moment the lights would flicker on the hook in the elevator lobby. Halfway down the corridor, she nearly missed the turn when the exit sign's arrow pointed to the right. No sooner was she around the corner than the double doors behind her banged open. There was a terrible crash, as if someone was throwing furniture. She could almost feel the blast of air percuss against the back of her neck. She took a step and then winced when her shoes clicked on the laminate floors. Kicking off her heels, she now had a weapon. Tally hustled toward the exit sign. So much for the motion detectors. Lights were coming on behind her, strobing closer and closer. Finally, an exit sign with an arrow pointing to a door. She pushed it open and entered yet another narrow corridor just as the hallway behind her lit up. Afraid to look back, she started moving, trying door after door, zigzagging back and forth down the arched passageway in search of one that would open. The hall followed the curved shape of the building and obscured her sight line, but the slam of the door she'd come through pounded against her ears. Her neck prickled at the sense of malevolence that bore down on her. Whoever it was had to be Fascina. How else could they manipulate the lighting? But why would they want to hurt her? She was a non, no one of consequence. Her twin had inherited all of the power from their parents. Tally kept moving. She could hear her pursuer stalking her, soles pounding the tiles, making a squishing noise with each step. Images of blood-covered ER floors came to mind and how the non-slip shoes the nurses wore would squelch in the gore. Her heart would be sure to burst if she didn't turn around to identify the man pursuing her, but she was more afraid of knowing who it was. She whipped around another corner, speeding down another deserted hallway. Finally, an unlocked windowless door. She shouldered it open, praying that he would run past the room. Closing it as quietly as possible, she engaged the simple push lock on the doorknob, knowing it to be but a tiny defense against a powerful Fascina. She shivered in the cold quiet and clamped her jaw tight to stop her teeth from chattering. Then she stretched her arms out in the pitch-dark room, blindly searching back and forth for a place to hide, until she ran into a wall of cold steel. She ran her fingers over what seemed to be square metal panels, then found a handle? Shit, she whispered as she groped over the rectangular doors, stacked one on top of the other, spreading out along the entire wall. How in the hell had she made it into the morgue? From under the crack at the bottom of the door, the corridor lights blazed hotter and hotter, marking the Facina's approach. Her eyes adjusted just enough for her to see the metal tables, organs organized precisely end to end, side by side, with not a trace of warmth for their silent, supine occupants. In the middle, an empty table with a sheet folded neatly at one end sang to her a cruel, coaxing lullaby. Unable to resist its pliant, she climbed onto it, rested her head on the hard block, and drew the sheet over her body and face. The cold metal stung the small of her back, where her blouse had inched up, despite the sheet covering her. She felt utterly exposed. And she waited and waited. Tally let out the breath she'd been holding when it had seemed that he had passed by the door, but she dared not move. Then she heard it, a key sliding into the lock and the door slowly opening. Click, click, and then another click. The fluorescence flickered on, growing brighter under her until her eyes hurt from staring at the blinding white of the sheet covering her face. He was here. All of the pressure in her ears whooshed away as his hand touched her shoulder. Tally? Her eyes flew open and she gasped, choking on the very air she was trying to breathe. Disoriented, she looked out all around, only to discover that she was still in her office. Hey, Bane said, sitting next to her and rubbing her back. She searched his face, tried to calm her breath, imagining the arc again, but her once open palms were now curled into fists. Bane pried them open, revealing that her nails had cut into her flesh.